Well, let's then have an overlook of the male reproductive system. Let's start with the main gonad, main reproductive organ, gonad. That's testis, right? It is where the main sex hormones are generated, are secreted and produced, and it's also where the gametes, sperms are generated. And then after the sperm is generated, it's going to be stored in the epididymis. That's this kind of comma-shaped structure, right, on top of the testis. And then from there, it's going to be connected through those ductal system. This one is called ductus deferens, right? Then connected to the male urethral, right? Actually, you have a merge of the urethral here. So, but before it hits the male urethral, you actually have the seminal vesicle right here, secrete semen, right? Seminal fluid, and then is there you have the sperms. When the sperms are mixed with the seminal fluid, and then it becomes semen, and you have this ejaculatory duct, right, and then connected to the urethra. So here you see the this is where, right, it connects to the urinary bladder. So this is the urinary bladder here. That's prostatic urethra. But then over here you have the merge of the ejaculatory ducts, right? And in the prostate, surrounded by the prostate gland. So then this ductal system then is going to travel, right, from the ejaculatory duct, then through the other parts of the remaining part of the prostatic urethral, then membranous urethral, then the spongy urethral, and to the outside. So this is another look of the male reproductive system. This is a frontal look. So you can actually not only see the testes, but also in different layers, right? So if you look at, so the testis itself, right, and the epididymis is what's inside of the scrotum, but then they are wrapped around also by these layers of the spermatic cord wall. So that's the extension of the spermatic cord wall, and also extension of that also wrap around the testis. So what's in those layers of the spermatic cord wall? You have the external spermatic fascia, right? That's a connective tissue, and then you also have the inner spermatic fascia. But in between, you have a muscle layer called the cremastic muscle, and that's the muscle that when it contracts, right? Because it's basic continuation from the abdominal pelvic wall, and when it contracts, it's going to raise the testis, right? And when it's relaxed, then it's going to the testis is going to descend, right? It's all because of this cremastic muscle. So based on the temperature, right, you could have the testis getting closer to your body or further away from your body, because you want to keep the testis cooler, right, a couple degrees cooler than your body temperature, but you don't want it to be frozen, right? So that's why when it's cold, you have the testis raised, getting closer, raised up, and if it's hot weather, then the testis is going to descend. And so that's basically controlled by this cremastic muscle. And there's another muscle called, it's a smooth muscle underneath the scrotum. Scrotum is actually this skin, underneath the skin layer, right? So then it's called dartos muscle. And that's the one that actually raises sternum, scrotum when contracted. So one of those muscle startles, which one is responsible for scrotum contraction, which one is responsible for testis contracts, you need to know, right? So what's in this spermatic cord? So it basically has the ductus deferens. That's the duct system, basically where the sperm travels. But it also has blood vessels and as well as nerves, right? All travel together in this spermatic cord. And in this diagram, you can see the penis here too, right? So that's, but we'll focus on especially the scrotum and the testis and spermatic cord, right? And those two muscles and their function. So here is a zoom-in look of the testis. You actually have the sperms generated in those seminiferous tubule. So those are the tubules, and they at most 4 of them are together form a lobule. So that's a lobule. Within each lobule, you have a few seminiferous tubule. That's where the sperms are generated. And then you can see the ducts going to collect all those sperms being generated, and then going into the epididymis, this comma-shaped structure, right? So that's where the sperms are stored, and then from there, then it's going to go through the ductus. So this is the head of the epididymis, right? Then the tail of the epididymis, and then going to go into this tubule. Those ducts is called ductus deferens. Let's have a look how the sperms are generated in the seminiferous tube. So this is a histology picture showing you this part of the testis, right? You see a bunch of cells and different sizes, right? And what's in the lumen looks like are those cells with long tails, and what's in the lumen essentially are the sperms. So from the from the membrane, right, to the lumen, this is the process, basically how the sperms get generated. So you start with the spermatogonia, right? So those are the bigger cells right here, right next to the membrane, right? And so those are, you can see 46, right? 46 chromosomes. That means they have 23 pairs. And so they are going to go through mitotic division, generates exactly the same 2 daughter cells. Each still have 46 46 chromosomes, right? And then, but then they are the primary spermatocytes. They are the ones going to divide into, each one of them going to divide into 4 daughter cells. Right, those are 4 daughter cells. Not all of them are different from each other, and this is going through a meiosis, right? 2 round of division. So primary spermatocells, secondary spermatocells, right? So this is at the end of meiosis. It's already haploid. And so then once it gets closer, so then those then it's closer to the lumen. The cells here, the daughter cells here, then becomes developed into, so there are spermatids becoming sperms. So you can see there's a big cell here that's supporting the spermatogenesis, right? So this is a process called spermatogenesis, and that's the cell called sustacular cell, and in your lab exercise it's called Sertoli cell. So a lot of those kind of cells you can see different nomenclature, right? Different names. So this is a cell originally discovered by Sertoli this person called Sotoli. But then where our textbooks try to move away from, the names named after the people discovered it, because then it's becoming too many, names, people's name. So they are trying to kind of make it using the new names that basically give you a hint about what they do. So sustaincular cell basically giving you a hint. Those are the cells that sustain the spermatogenesis, right? So they support this process, the spermatids, and all those primary, secondary, and spermatids in development. And then so you can see on the other side of this membrane, those are interstitial cells. And those are the cells actually produce the hormones, the male sex hormones. So we're going to see that, talk about that in the lecture. There's another process called a spermiogenesis, and that's describing the process that from a spermatid, right? So those are the round cells called spermatid, then to become a matured sperm. So you have the, a flagella start to generate it out, and then you also end up with a head, a middle piece, and the tail. Tail is the flagella. And the sperm, the nucleus of the sperm is right here. It's actually in the head. Lastly, this is the table, the first table of the chapter. Actually compare, right, the male organ and the male organ and the female organ, and they are actually homologous organs, right? They have a common function, so they have the same origin during the development, and they actually perform similar functions. The very first one is ovary and testes. Of course, they are the gonads, right, for each sex, and their function is to produce gametes and sex hormones. And the sex hormones are actually different, right, in each gender. Then we also have other homologous organs, such as, in the male, you have glands of a penis that contains erectile tissue. And then you actually also participate in sexual arousal. And in the females, you also have a homologous organ, even though much smaller, but still, has the same function. That's clitoris. And then similarly, then you have the labia minora, labia majora, right? Each correspond to have a homologous male organ. Lastly, there's I think I forgot to mention this. This is bubble urethral gland in the male organ, right? Its function is to secrete mucin for lubrication. And if, even if I forgot to mention this in the overview diagram, you might want to make an educated guess. If I say the function of this gland is to secrete mucin for lubrication, where do you think you are going to find it? Is it in the testes? Is it along the duct system that, the semen travels, right? Let's go back here and let's look at where is bubble urethral gland. So you see urethral, right? It's close actually in the urethral, right here, and it's because the gland, it has a bubble shape. So that's why it's called bubble urethral gland. So it's right here. So the secretion of this gland as well as the seminal fluid are all alkaline. So that's kind of together makes the semen more alkaline. Of course, then what's the homologous organ in female? That's the greater vestibular gland. It also secretes mucin for lubrication, but doesn't have the alkaline kind of component. But it also functions similarly in terms of it secretes the mucin for lubrication. in the lecture, we're going to see a diagram to show you where in female is the greater vestibular gland. That's all for today. And I think your exercise 9 wants you to actually list the homologous organ, right? Reproductive organ from male and female. This will be helpful for you. But to summarize, to identify, right, where is each one of those organs in the model, and then know their functions too.